Good Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for joining us on Kare 11 News Now. I'm Chris Haramsky. New this afternoon, we now know when Vance Belter will be sentenced for the murder of Melissa and Mark Hortman. Belter will appear before a federal judge in Minneapolis on July 23rd. Belter, he pleaded guilty to the murders and attempted murders and stalking of State Senator John Hoffman, his wife Yvette, and their daughter Hope earlier this month. Belter is also charged with first-degree murder and other counts in state court. Those charges were on hold until the results of the federal cases. Developing right now, St. Paul Public Schools making some serious cuts across the school district after the school board approved the 2026-27 school year budget. That budget has a more than $14 million deficit. The district says it's planning to cut 90 positions in schools and increase kindergarten class sizes. The deficit mostly comes from declining enrollment, with the district losing about 900 students in 2 years. We're learning more about the next steps the city of Minneapolis has taken to find a new police chief following the resignation of Brian O'Hara. Mayor Jacob Fry says the plan is to have a new person installed by this fall. Sammy Salina has more on what that process is going to look like.
In October or November, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry hopes a new chief of police will be confirmed. Fry announced a 16-week timeline and process of finding a new chief that will include interviews with city council members, police leadership, evaluations, and screenings. Phase 1 includes conducting a survey within the police department.
If I had known earlier, I would not have renominated him. If I found out later after this confirmation, I would have reached the same conclusion.
This announcement comes about a month after the mayor revealed Brian O'Hara resigned from the role following findings he interfered with an internal investigation. It took the city about 10 months to hire O'Hara after Chief Madaria Arredondo retired.
There are a lot of challenges in the city of Minneapolis. Probably the biggest is finding someone that's going to help them be able to recruit new officers, but also continue with a lot of the reform work that the department's been working on.
Jeff Potts is a former Bloomington police chief and is the executive director of the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association. He says this timeline is quick for a search for a chief of a major city.
There may be some reluctance from some really qualified candidates because the city is just got a lot of challenges.
The city has highlighted improvements in violent crime, police reform, recruitment, and retention. Potts says that momentum could change.
It's certainly going to probably slow down while the process is underway, but it can quickly resume where it was. And maybe even depending on who the new leader is, it could surpass momentum that they've felt over the last 3 or 4 years.
And in 4 months, the city hopes that leader will be confirmed. Sammy Salina, Kare 11 News.
The director of the Minnesota Justice Research Center pointed out the challenges that leadership faces with recruiting a chief, as she said. He says that the person will need to see consent decrees, trust building, and ongoing friction with the federal government as an opportunity to create a great police department. Got a heads up for Metro Transit drivers. Buses are going to replace trains along the blue and green lines starting next week. Metro Transit says buses will take over for the route between the Mall of America and Target Field stations. That switch is happening from June 29th until August 19th. The Green Line trains from the West Bank and Target Field stations will be replaced by buses from July 1st through July 26th, and again in the middle of August. Those closures are for maintenance on the tracks. It has been 4 years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, eliminating the constitutional right to an abortion. And today, local activists say that they're fighting for bodily autonomy. The People's Action Coalition Against Trump says they're holding a rally to talk about the impacts of overturning Roe v. Wade, as well as recent Medicaid cuts. They'll meet at 5 o'clock on the bridge over 94 on Snelling Avenue. That's in St. Paul. Developing this afternoon, President Trump has canceled the signing of a major housing bill until Congress passes the Save America Act. That's the sweeping elections bill, which would overhaul elections in all 50 states and add new proof of citizenship and voter ID requirements. Right now, it's not clear if the president is just postponing the signing or if he will veto it. Got to look at the Capitol right now, this afternoon, where there is a growing divide over a deal to end the war with Iran. Republicans in the Senate helping pass a war powers resolution Tuesday, which urges President Trump to remove U.S. troops from the region or seek congressional approval before going to war. Today, President Trump met with the Secretary General of NATO to talk about the allies' involvement in the war and the possibility to Europe and Canada getting more involved with NATO. Trump says allies need to be more involved in the war and boost their military spending. Right now, the U.S. is performing a Pentagon review of the U.S. forces across Europe. Meantime, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in the United Arab Emirates trying to reassure Gulf allies who say that the new deal with Iran is too soft. NBC's Matt Bradley is in Tel Aviv with details.
Well, America's diplomatic cavalry has arrived in the Middle East, once again fighting to preserve the terms of that memorandum of understanding that President Trump signed last week along with Iran's president. That memorandum of understanding now, in theory, fully in place. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is the next man in line after J.D. Vance just went to Europe. Rubio is in the Middle East, specifically in the Gulf countries, where he's going to be trying to sell this deal. Gulf countries share a lot of concerns that Israel has, specifically that the memorandum and some of these negotiations that have been ongoing don't address Iran's ballistic missile capability. It was those ballistic missiles that pelted here in Israel and throughout the Gulf region ever since the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran back in late February. The question of Iran's nuclear missile program or weapons program, which Iran has always denied having, but that these 60 days of negotiations are supposed to resolve. Also, the question about Iranian backing for its proxy groups throughout the region. That's a major source of concern for both the Israelis and for the Gulf countries. Now, all of these issues under discussion, but the fact is, what is being raised now just goes to show that a lot of the issues that were supposed to be resolved before these negotiations began still very much remain topics of discussion. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
Today we're hearing from a Big Lake nonprofit after the state suddenly overturned its terminated Medicaid status. This is video from Option Inc.'s town hall last night. The nonprofit serves nearly 200 people with disabilities. At the end of May, the Department of Human Services disenrolled about 3,400 providers, including Option Inc., to try and root out fraud and protect billions in federal Medicaid dollars. But Options Inc. says legitimate providers are being swept into the chaos.
Hannah is not a line item. She's not a number in a database. She's a person. So are there nearly 200 other individuals who depend on organizations like this every day.
Right now, it's not clear how many other providers are in limbo. We reached out to DHS, haven't heard back. Right now, the Minnesota Attorney General's office says 7 social service providers are facing fraud charges as part of a nationwide crackdown. The providers charged in Minnesota are accused of fraudulently billing more than $700,000. Prosecutors say they charged nationwide programs for services they didn't provide, as well as services provided by unlicensed workers. Attorney General Keith Ellison's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit will prosecute the local cases. And across the country, DOJ leaders say the false claim charges add up to $6.5 billion. Lately, we've had a third thing to count on in life. We got death, we got taxes, and people being upset about data centers powering AI. All across Minnesota, city council meetings have become yelling matches. Residents not shy about raising their voices about the issue. Heidi Wigdahl now with a closer look.
No, the motion to recess and reconvene is carried.
Inver Grove Heights residents reacted strongly after City Council recessed early, delaying a vote that, if passed, would put a 1-year moratorium on data center developments. It's just one of many recent examples that speak to the fight over data centers.
The rapid change in AI, there is a big demand. Data centers have always existed earlier, but now in the past 3 or 4 years with generative AI, with ChatGPT, there is a huge demand not only for storing the data, but also computing that data.
Professor Manjit Rege serves as the director of the Center for Applied Artificial Intelligence at the University of St. Thomas.
Every piece of software that you use today, whether it's on your phone or whether it's in a self-driving car, or whether it's that smart thermostat in your house, you have AI part of it.
But Manjit says the regulatory landscape has not caught up with the pace of these data center deals.
Minnesota land availability in terms of access to power, as well as our cooler temperatures, makes it an attractive location for housing these data centers.
According to the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, there are at least 60 data centers across the state.
In terms of the economic impact to the local community, there could be a revenue that comes in, property taxes, and this is where the deals come in.
But Manjit says the long-term environmental impacts need to be evaluated, from power to water usage. The Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy says more than 20 hyperscale or massive data centers have been proposed in the state, claiming that if just 10 are built, they would consume as much energy as the entire state of Minnesota. While opponents have many concerns, Manjit says it's been made worse with companies and city leaders having conversations behind closed doors.
You can understand why the residents may have concern with that. There needs to be more of a statewide uniform policy as opposed to individual cities going and making deals.
Multiple cities in Minnesota have implemented one-year moratoriums, including Eagan, Carver, and Rosemount.
Once we spend that time in evaluating the long-term impacts and having a statewide policy, I think then from that point onwards, adoption of data centers could be a lot faster. This trend is picking up and it is only going to increase. We just need to have policies around that align with our Minnesota environmental values.
Heidi Wigdahl reporting there. A recent Kare 11 Minnesota Star Tribune and Hubbard School of Journalism poll found that more than 60% of Minnesotans are opposed to data centers in their communities. 15% say they're undecided. Well, today fans are speaking out after the Dave Matthews Band's show at the new Mystic Lake Amphitheater was postponed because of weather last night. Take a look at these photos shared by the band's photographer on Instagram. You can see water that was pooling around the floor seats in the pit there, and buckets catching leaks inside the venue. In the last few hours, these posts were deleted from Instagram. Some fans took to social media questioning Mystic Lake's decision to postpone the show. It was advertised as rain or shine. I know I had my raincoat on and was ready to go to the show when we saw on social media that it was canceled, despite the sun coming out, but clearly that venue was not ready to rock and roll in that kind of weather. The venue says that all tickets are going to be honored for the band's new show, made a new one, on Monday, August 31st. Stick with us. We got more news and weather coming up after the break.